She'd been targeting black men for years, cloaked in the authority of her badge, until the day she dragged the wrong one into court, and everything began to unravel. The heat hung heavy over Dalton, Tennessee, pressing down on the cracked sidewalks and peeling paint. Marcus Tate guided his rental car down Willow Avenue, nearing his aunt's house. A grocery bag sat on the passenger seat, orange juice, a loaf of sourdough, her beloved oatmeal raisin cookies. This visit was supposed to be simple, restful. He hadn't been back in nearly 2 years, but Dalton still wore its familiar face. In the rearview mirror, he spotted the patrol car. It had been tailing him for 6 blocks. He eased off the gas, flicked his blinker, changed lanes. The cruiser stayed with him. Then the flash of red and blue lights. A short, sharp wail of the siren. Marcus exhaled softly. "Of course," he murmured, pulling to the curb. The patrol car door swung open. Out strode Officer Laura Hensley, late 40s, brunette, rigid posture, mirrored sunglasses catching the glare. She walked with the air of someone who never doubted she was in charge. Her hand rested lightly on her holster as she approached. "License and registration," she ordered, tone flat. Marcus kept his hands visible on the wheel. "Sure." Just reaching for the glove box, slow and steady. "Make it quick," she snapped. He moved carefully, handing over his documents. "What brings you to this neighborhood?" "My aunt lives 3 blocks up," he answered. She lifted an eyebrow. "Car's a rental?" "Yeah. Flew in from Portland yesterday." Laura studied him a beat too long. "Step out of the vehicle." Marcus frowned. "I'm sorry." "Step out," she repeated, sharper this time. He obeyed, hands up, confused. She circled him, appraising him like he was merchandise. "You fit the description of a burglary suspect this morning. Don't move." "I've been at my aunt's all morning," Marcus said. "She can confirm." She didn't reply. Instead, she called for backup. Marcus shook his head. "Officer, I know my rights. I haven't broken any law." "I'd like to." "Hands on the hood," she barked. "Am I being detained?" She stepped forward and shoved him toward the car. "Hands. Now." Marcus's expression shifted, not fear, not fury, but something quieter, resignation. He turned and pressed his palms flat against the warm hood. She patted him down, brusque. "I'm a data analyst," he said calmly. "Consultant for tech firms. I don't carry weapons. Or drugs. Or whatever it is you're hoping to find." "Quiet," she snapped. "You're digging yourself deeper." A second patrol car arrived. Officer Ramirez, younger and less certain, stepped out. Laura briefed him in a low voice. He looked unconvinced but stayed quiet. She cuffed Marcus anyway. "What's the charge?" he asked steadily. "Resisting arrest," she replied. "I didn't resist." "You raised your voice. Step toward me." "No," Marcus said quietly. "I asked a question." "You didn't like it." Her jaw tightened. She led him to the back of the cruiser. As they drove, Marcus sat still, his phone buzzing in his pocket, his aunt, no doubt, wondering where he was. He thought of the groceries, wilting in the heat. He thought of the last time he saw someone cuffed for nothing. He wasn't afraid. He was tired. Tired of proving himself, tired of standing still while others rewrote the story. At the station, they took his mugshot. The walls smelled sterile. A clipboard was shoved into his hands without explanation. Laura filled out her report in practice strokes: aggressive stance, threatening tone, non-compliant. But something felt off this time. He hadn't broken, hadn't begged, hadn't lashed out. He'd looked her dead in the eye, and that unsettled her more than she could admit. They kept him overnight. No call. No answers. Just a cold bench, flickering light, muffled voices behind glass. Marcus leaned his head against the wall, wrists aching from the cuffs. He wasn't afraid. He was calculating. This wasn't about code or clients. This was personal. At 7:28 a.m., the cell door creaked open. An older officer, gray at the temples, stepped inside with a clipboard. "You're charged with obstruction and resisting," he said flatly. "Bail hearing this afternoon." Marcus looked up. "I didn't obstruct. I didn't resist. I was pulled over without cause." The officer shifted. "It's in the report. I want to see the report." "You'll need a lawyer for that." "I'll get one." They granted him one call. He rang Curtis Langley, a law school friend turned defense attorney in Chattanooga. They hadn't spoken in years, but Curtis answered on the second ring. Within an hour, he was on his way. "Stay put," Curtis told him. "I've got this." Laura watched from her desk as Curtis arrived that afternoon, sharp in a charcoal suit, briefcase in hand, every step deliberate. She recognized the type: city lawyer, steady gaze, polite but unyielding. She didn't like it. "Can I help you?" she asked tightly. "I'm representing Mr. Tate," Curtis replied. "I'm here for the footage and the incident report." She drummed her fingers. "That's internal. Goes to court." Curtis leaned closer. "If your account's solid, officer, you shouldn't mind me reviewing it now." She stared him down but said nothing. Marcus was released on bail 2 hours later. Laura watched him walk out with Curtis. Something twisted in her gut. He wasn't angry. He wasn't loud. He was determined. That night, Laura sat at her kitchen table, staring at the report. The words were familiar: suspect failed to comply, raised voice, advanced toward officer. She opened her laptop, clicked play on the dashcam footage, and froze when she saw herself shove him. She closed the laptop, pushed back her chair, and walked away. Across town, Marcus and Curtis reviewed documents in Curtis's condo. She filed it like clockwork, Curtis said. This wasn't her first time. "I know," Marcus replied. "I've already found 3 complaints. 1 sealed, 2 tossed out. All black men. Last 6 years. Marcus leaned forward. "I'm not letting it go." "You're sure?" "Absolutely. People like her count on silence." "I'm not staying quiet." Curtis nodded. "We'll subpoena the footage. I'll file in the morning." Meanwhile, Laura arrived at work the next day, chin high, gaze steely. But inside, a sliver of doubt gnawed at her. It shadowed her every interaction, every stop, every glance from her peers. She'd always trusted her instincts. But this wasn't instinct. It was something else. Still, she buried it, convinced herself she'd done her job, but the narrative wasn't hers to control anymore. The courthouse was unremarkable: brick walls, narrow windows, the weight of small-town history. It had seen tax disputes, custody fights, and now, the arrest of a man who shouldn't have been in cuffs. Curtis filed a motion to suppress the footage, a complaint to investigate Laura's conduct. A hearing was set for 2 weeks. Laura sat in her cruiser, reading the notice. Her throat tightened, not fear, but pressure. She folded the paper and drove away. In Curtis's office, Marcus pored over public records, articles, old footage. "That's her?" Curtis asked, holding a 2018 clipping. "Yeah," Marcus confirmed. "Black kid, wrong street, fit a description. 19. Going to trade school. Left with a fractured arm for resisting. No charges. No lawyer. He just wanted it over." Marcus placed the clipping down. "Not this time." Elsewhere, Tanya Morrow, a clerk at the courthouse, took notice. She'd grown up in the same neighborhood Laura once patrolled. She remembered the pattern: familiar faces stopped again and again for simply walking home. She remembered her cousin Jamal, 16, jailed for interfering with an officer. Same wording. Same badge. When Tanya saw Marcus's name linked to Hensley, it clicked. She didn't call the press. She went to Curtis. They met in a quiet diner off Main Street. I know what she's been doing, Tanya said. And I'm not the only one. Curtis leaned forward. You're willing to testify? I'll tell it all. Names. Dates. What I saw. What I was told to hide. Marcus studied her. Why now? Her gaze held steady. Because I should have spoken up years ago. I'm done being complicit. Her words settled in the air. Curtis nodded. We'll add your statement. That night, Laura parked in her driveway, engine off. The porch light flickered. The street felt too still. Inside, she shed her uniform and turned on the TV. Her name crawled across the screen, officer under investigation after controversial traffic stop. Local news. Brief. But sharp. She turned it off. At roll call the next morning, the room felt different. Colleagues avoided her eyes. Some nodded tersely. Ramirez, once quiet support, kept his distance. Her supervisor summoned her afterward. Closed the door. You're on desk duty pending the hearing. Laura stiffened. I followed procedure. The court will decide. She walked out, the air thinner around her. This wasn't just the department now. It was her name in headlines. Her decisions under scrutiny. Deep down, she sensed the outcome. But she clung to her story, until the footage played in court. By week's end, the story spread like fire. Marcus's face filled news feeds, radio shows, community boards. Some painted him as a professional, an innocent nephew wrongfully stopped. Others echoed Laura's words, defiant, combative. The town split neatly in two. At J&J's Barber Lounge on Carver Street, the usual crowd gathered, same as every Saturday. Clippers buzzed in the background. Voices overlapped, debates, jokes, frustrations. I know Marcus, one man said, leaning forward in his chair. Grew up a block from his aunt. He's a good dude. If he says she crossed a line, believe me, she crossed it. A younger guy near the window shook his head. Cops don't stop you for nothing, though. An older man across the room snorted. Son, you're too young to know how this town works. In churches, whispers spread. Teachers swapped stories in the lounge after school. At Curtis's law office, a retired electrician named Vernon knocked on the door. She pulled the same thing on me back in 16, Vernon said, taking a seat. I was leaving my shift at the plant. She slammed me against my truck for walking suspiciously. Never filed a complaint. Figured nobody'd listen. Curtis leaned forward. Would you be willing to go on record now? Vernon hesitated. You think they'll care this time? Curtis held his gaze. One truth can open a crack. This case might be that crack. And maybe, Curtis thought, this time something would finally shift. Meanwhile, Laura's world shrank. At the coffee shop, familiar baristas avoided eye contact. At the grocery store, a woman in line moved her cart away when Laura stepped behind her. Neighbors glanced at their phones as she passed. At the precinct, conversations dried up when she entered the room. Her locker got reassigned, moved to a lonely corner nobody used. She told herself it was temporary. That things would blow over. But deep down, she knew the ground beneath her was changing. She avoided mirrors lately. The face staring back looked unfamiliar, strained, tired, cracking. That Saturday night, her phone rang. Her sister's name lit up the screen. Hey, Laura answered, keeping her voice even. You okay? Her sister asked. I saw your name online. I'm fine, Laura replied sharply. Sure. Feels like it's blowing up. It's just noise. People trying to stir things. Her sister was quiet for a moment. Laura, if you're in the wrong, you gotta be honest. I said I'm fine, Laura snapped. Okay, her sister sighed. Take care. Laura ended the call, tossing her phone onto the couch. She sat down heavily. The silence in her apartment felt loud, pressing in from all sides. Her mind flicked to Tanya Morrow, the records clerk at the station. Tanya had looked at her funny lately, a knowing look, maybe even a judgment. Laura poured herself a drink, standing at the window. She wasn't going to lose everything over one stop. She'd worked too damn hard for this badge. At Curtis's office, Tanya sat across the desk, signing her affidavit. They slipped her statement into a growing folder marked Tate vs. Hensley. They had 3 sworn statements now: Vernon, a factory worker, a retired librarian. All described similar encounters with Laura stretching back nearly a decade. Think we'll get the dashcam footage in time? Marcus asked quietly. Curtis nodded. Judge approved the order yesterday. It'll be in court next week. The case was building. The town was holding its breath. Some wanted Laura exposed. Others wanted it swept under the rug. The night before the hearing, Laura sat in her cruiser outside the station, staring at the courthouse across the street. Her pulse thudded against her throat. She could still tweak her story on the stand, she told herself. Spin it just right. Maybe they'd buy it, but the footage was coming. And no amount of spin could erase it. The next day, the courtroom wasn't packed, but it felt full: reporters, families, locals, all watching. Marcus sat at the defense table, hands clasped, steady. Curtis stood beside him, flipping through documents. Across the aisle, Laura sat rigid in uniform, lips pressed tight. Judge Evelyn Harper entered, voice sharp. All rise. Everyone stood. You may be seated. It was just a preliminary hearing to decide if charges would proceed. But everyone knew it meant more: trust, accountability, the weight of history in a small town. Curtis stepped forward. Your Honor, we request to begin by playing the dashcam footage from Officer Hensley's patrol car. It directly contradicts the incident report. The judge gave a nod. Proceed. The lights dimmed. The screen flickered. Video played, audio clear, timestamp glowing. Marcus's car pulling over. Laura's voice ordering him out. Her hand near her holster. Her tone rising, escalating fast. The shove. Marcus pinned against the hood. His voice calm, hers sharp, then the cuffs. Then the silence. When it ended, the judge turned to Laura. Officer Hensley. Is this the interaction described in your report? Laura shifted in her seat. Not exactly, Your Honor. But in the moment, did the defendant raise his voice? Approach you aggressively? Laura swallowed. He challenged my authority. Did he resist? She looked at Marcus. He met her gaze, steady, unwavering. No, she said softly. Not physically. A murmur rippled through the room. Curtis stood again. Your Honor, we submit 3 sworn affidavits from other citizens detailing similar encounters with Officer Hensley over the past 8 years. This isn't isolated. It's a pattern. He called Vernon to the stand. Vernon straightened his jacket, cleared his throat. She stopped me leaving work. Said I ran a red. I didn't argue. I just asked why. She made me get out, called backup, searched my truck. Found nothing, gave me a ticket anyway. Laura stared down at her hands. The librarian spoke next. Then the factory worker. Each story echoed the last. Laura's gaze grew distant, her body still. Then it was her turn. She walked to the stand slowly. Swore in. Sat, hands clasped tight. Curtis approached. Officer Hensley, how long have you served with Dalton Police? 11 years, she answered quietly. How many complaints have been filed against you? 3. Were any found valid? No, even this one. She hesitated. I thought I was following protocol. Do you still believe that? She looked at Marcus. Looked at Tanya in the back of the room. Looked at the judge. No, she whispered. Curtis stepped back. Thank you. The judge called a recess. Outside, reporters swarmed. Laura slipped out a side door with her lawyer. Marcus stood on the courthouse steps, not smiling, not celebrating, just breathing. Back inside, Judge Harper reconvened. I've reviewed the footage, statements, and reports. There is sufficient evidence to proceed to trial against Officer Hensley for misconduct and falsifying a report. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell. Marcus sat quietly. Curtis patted his shoulder. Outside, the courthouse bells rang, steady as truth breaking the surface. The gavel fell. Laura stood slowly, her badge heavier than it had ever felt. But the verdict wasn't the end. What came next would decide if anything truly changed. The trial didn't drag. Once the dashcam footage hit the internet, it couldn't be contained. Local news ran it on repeat, national blogs picked it up. Laura Hensley's name became shorthand for small-town policing gone wrong. She was suspended without pay pending an internal review. Her union lawyer blamed stress, poor judgment, a difficult situation, but no one was listening. 3 weeks later, the courtroom filled again. This time for the verdict. Laura sat at the defense table in plain clothes, no badge, no uniform, just a sweater, hair pulled tight, her face pale and drawn. Marcus was there, steady. Tanya sat behind him. Vernon too. Others who'd spoken up were scattered among the crowd, quiet but present. Judge Harper spoke plainly. I've reviewed the evidence and testimony. I find Officer Laura Hensley guilty of misconduct and filing a false report. Sentencing: no incarceration, permanent revocation of law enforcement certification, and disqualification from future policing roles. The words landed like stones. Outside, reporters called her name as she exited. She kept her head low, moving fast toward the parking lot. She hoped to disappear. But everyone saw. Curtis clapped Marcus on the shoulder. You did it. Marcus watched the cameras, the crowd, the people finally paying attention. I didn't do anything special, he said quietly. I just refused to stay quiet. That evening, local news hosted a panel of experts. One called it a reckoning for small departments insulated from oversight. Another warned that a single case doesn't undo decades of silence. Marcus didn't watch. He sat on his aunt's porch, sipping tea from a chipped mug. She handed him a plate of toast with jam and sat beside him. You holding up okay? She asked. I think so, he said. But it's not really over. She nodded. Never is. But they had to see you this time. He watched a kid zip past on a scooter, laughing. An older woman strolled by with a terrier. Life moved forward. But the air felt different. A week later, the city announced a full review of every stop made by Officer Hensley over the past decade. Internal Affairs reached out to dozens with past complaints. The mayor promised transparency. Marcus wasn't impressed by promises. He wanted proof. He filed a civil suit, not for money, but for records. He wanted access to names, files, patterns. He wanted to make sure no one else had to prove they belonged in their own neighborhood. A month later, Laura left Dalton. No farewell. No statement. Just gone. Her house quietly went up for sale. Her patrol car was auctioned. Her name faded from headlines, but not from the town's collective memory. At a town hall 6 weeks later, Tanya stepped to the microphone. Nobody should fear asking why they've been stopped. Nobody should have to earn dignity. We can't undo the past, but we can stop repeating it. The applause wasn't loud. But it was real. That night, Marcus opened his email. Hundreds of messages, thanks, stories, please, from across Tennessee and beyond. He read each one, not for praise, but because every account proved that silence could never be an option again. Months passed. The media moved on. Dalton settled into its routines. But something had shifted in the quiet corners where whispers once lived. At Westview High, a civics teacher added Marcus's case to her lesson plan. At J&J's, younger patrons leaned closer when elders shared stories of the past. A church bulletin read, "Your voice has power, even if it trembles." Marcus didn't head back to Portland right away. He stayed. Attended council meetings. At first, he just listened. But soon, people approached. Could he help draft a letter? Review a complaint? Share what he'd learned? Every Wednesday at the community center, he hosted a Know Your Rights workshop. Word spread. The room filled, teens, retirees, single parents, even an off-duty officer, sitting silently in the back. One evening, a 16-year-old named Malik asked him, "Did you ever think about quitting?" Marcus paused. "All the time," he admitted. "But if I had, she'd still have that badge. And I'd still be wondering what could have changed if I'd spoken up." Malik nodded thoughtfully. "No more letting things slide, right?" "Right," Marcus said. "Not anymore." Curtis visited from Chattanooga every few weeks. They worked on the civil case, but more often they talked about change, what it meant, what it cost. "It's not about punishment," Marcus said one evening. "It's about making truth matter." Curtis chuckled. "That's a campaign slogan if I've ever heard one." Marcus laughed. "Don't even joke." But people were already asking. About leadership. About running for office. About what came next. In a small rental 2 towns over, Laura kept her head down. No badge. No job. Every door closed quietly in her face. She applied for security gigs. No calls back. Her name followed her like a shadow. One night, she stumbled across a recording of Marcus's workshop online. She watched, anonymous, saying nothing. When he said, "Your silence lets others act," she paused the video and sat motionless in the dark. Not everyone seeks redemption. Not everyone finds it. But the story wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to Dalton, to its kids, to those who once felt invisible. Truth doesn't wait for permission. It just needs to be spoken. And when it's said, heard, believed, and backed by action, it can change everything. And if you're reading this, and someone's told you to stay quiet, to let it go, to keep your head down, don't. Your story counts. Say it. Share it. Fight for it, even if your voice shakes.